The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/getadvice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
Feel the pulse of the city. Feel the beat of the drum. Feel the bass blow your hair. In Las Vegas, live music delivers much more than sound. It's where music comes alive with artists like Megan Thee Stallion, Maroon 5, Carrie Underwood, Shania Twain, Babyface, Lionel Richie, and many more. Every show is a playground for your senses. See the full summer lineup at visitlasvegas.com.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to Gone By Lunchtime. My name is Toby Manhire. A big thank you to Spin-off members for making this possible. Thank you to Jane Yee, the pod boss of the Spin-off Podcast Network. It is Wednesday, March the 16th, 2022, the middle of the morning. With me, Annabelle Lee Mather. Back today, Ben Thomas and a very special guest, a former cabinet minister, a former national leader, a former yak whisperer. Simon Bridges announced yesterday, to the surprise of almost everyone, that he was going to stop being a politician and start being an explorer of commercial and media opportunities. The good news for him, as he works through his cost of midlife crisis, is that public transport is now half price, so it's a bit cheaper as he travels the country looking for those opportunities. Welcome, Simon Bridges.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I am an explorer. I like that.
Can you tell us what you have signed so far in your career?
Look, other than the EMI label for a rerun of We Are the World circa 1980, whatever it is, it's because that's what I feel like right now with these headphones on. No, there are no signatures yet. I am exploring. And, I'm not going to be overly coy with you. I have been talking as I explore because one is not entirely stupid and does need to keep the wolves from the door. But the exploration continues, and my comment about exploring maybe one or two media projects was just shameless boosterism to see what happened.
I was going to ask you.
It's worked, though. It's worked.
Is it true that you have quit politics after receiving an unturndownable offer of tens of dollars to replace your spiritual doppelganger, Ben Thomas, on Gone By Lunchtime?
You wouldn't believe it, mate. That will pay for the one or two chai lattes, but I'm excited already. No, that's not true. But it is a cruel. What did Jacinda call the cost of living crisis? It's like a wind. What was it? A wicked.
A perfect storm, was it?
A wicked perfect storm.
A wicked perfect storm.
It is a wicked perfect storm that it has taken my retirement to get myself onto Gone By Lunchtime. I mean, I've been angling. I feel suddenly possibly cool.
As the former Minister of Space, is it true that you're leaving Parliament to set up a program to send baby yaks into another universe?
How you are good. Well, I don't know if you saw that the former Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Nick Clegg, Liberal Democrat MP, He is now like number 2 or something at Facebook, earning like $18 gajillion a week. And I say this because you mentioned space and Jeff Bezos and what's the Virgin guy and several others are all. And look, you are right, and I'm breaking it on the show. I've signed a big contract to be part of those space programs because they know that I was New Zealand's first ever minister of a space agency.
Well, Ben is available to do your comms.
Well, I know he's high tech because I can see that microwave behind him.
The air fryer pushed it off the bench, right?
Well, make yourself available as an apologist for nefarious global corporate organisations.
Yeah, so Simon, yesterday, as soon as you resigned, whenever there's, it's been a long, 4 years in the wilderness for centre-right commentators. The phone doesn't call, nobody cares, until something happens in the National Party and suddenly everyone wants to be your friend again. So I had a lot of calls saying, do you want to do a wrap-up of Simon Bridges' career, look back fondly, tell us what's next? And, my first thought was, how can I make sure that he hasn't done anything before I go on record talking about what a great guy he is? And,
I find it so sad. That's the way people think.
I don't want to be on News Hub late nights, going like, a great guy who's contributed a lot to New Zealand politics while the ticker tape underneath runs like, Simon Bridges arrested for like murder, And so can we just do a bit of due diligence before I respond to this text from TVNZ? Is it true that you left because you were recently overheard demonstrating the technique for having triplets, and it was too outrageous to ever cover up?
You know that I can't even laugh at those sort of things without being vaguely inappropriate in my.
No, that's right. Let's move on.
But Ben, let's address your question seriously. There have been so many scandals in my career that have nearly killed me. Why the fuck would I leave for one now?
Well,
I just find this is not a plausible storyline.
No,
I fight my scandals in Parliament, not out. It is such. I couldn't believe Jessica March when it was like the first question she asked.
Yeah, what have you done? What's
if
wrong?
You don't know me by now.
Okay. In that case, I've got a follow-up question because I take that as read. I think you leave with a clean slate. But it is interesting. You say you've been involved in, I think, some of the most wild conflagrations we've seen, and some of the strangest incidents in political history that we've seen. Jamie Lee Ross, Judith Collins have opted basically to destroy their lives and careers just to get at you. And so I'm wondering, are you retiring to do a course on how to be a bit easier to get along with?
I have enjoyed all of it. And the thing that is, you are right, I don't know how I somehow justify this passion in people. I'm just a regular dickhead. There's not like a lot more to it that is why these people because you're right, they have exploded. These people have exploded on me.
Are you the sort of person, like when you're in public, someone will come up and start talking to you and you're like, oh, they recognize me, I'm Simon Bridges, public figure or something. And then they just start talking to you about, flat earth or, you just seem to kind of be a magnet for
that's only every
crazy.
Day. No, that's only every day. Actually, I don't, this is taking this too serious, but there's some guy, and I don't know if you know, there's this new MG they're not SUVs, but you can buy, and they're very reasonably priced. And this is not my first infomercial that I'm being subtly paid to put into the thing, okay? Anyway, it was a nice white MG, new late model car. I'm at the Mount in Tauranga, and I'm walking along with my family, my 10-year-old, 8-year-old, 4-year-old. And this guy, middle-class guy, it could have been Ben Thomas without the microwave. He was driving. He stops. He starts yelling at me, giving me the bird. This is like on Saturday, and I just thought, it wasn't why I've made this decision, but I am so glad that I made it. Because you know what I did to him? I was giving him the bird back. I was yelling at him. Like if I was not getting out, I was. Then this other one, Oh, no, I probably shouldn't say this one because we've got a by-election still. No, we won't go there.
No, go on.
We have a very small listenership. Very small listenership.
It's tame, but you know that tame for me still gets Simon into trouble. And
This
so,
is true.
I want Chris Luxon to win the by-election, and we're not going to do that. It's okay.
Well, we'll talk about the by-election in a second. You mentioned that it wasn't when the man was flapping the bird at you like crazy that you decided. There must have been a moment. You've been thinking about it for a while, but what was the precise moment? Exactly where were you? What were you doing when you went, yeah, I'm gonna chuck it in?
I think it was my partner Natalie's moment. That was probably about 5 years ago. It just took her quite a while for me to understand the decision that had been made. And, because I'm a slow learner. But no, in all seriousness, I think I have not had a midlife crisis, okay, but the book and all that. But I think it has been part of a couple-year process of working it out. And in truth, summer, and then the last couple of months. And what happens is it's not an overnight thing. You have days when you wake up and say, man, I love politics. I took it to Grant Robertson. That was amazing. I could do this forever. And then you have other days that you say, what are you doing, Simon? There's a real world out there and life and children and whānau and fun and happiness. And what happened for me is over time, those days become many more than the I need to stay in politics days. And then in the end, it just becomes an inevitability of sort of when. And actually, it was going to be the week before. This is new material, by the way. No one, I've said this nowhere. So it was going to be the week before, but I was isolating with COVID and I couldn't do it live in front of my colleagues, and I thought that was important. And then we got a good poll, and that seemed to me nice timing, and so Gone By Lunchtime.
Did getting forced to stay home with your children make you second-guess yourself, though? Because it would for me. I'd be like, shit, I don't know. I don't know if this is the right thing.
As has also come out, we're selling our home for a variety of complex reasons that don't, as one journalist asked me, include divorce. But anyway... So
wait, does that mean you're leaving Tauranga?
Well, we can get into that, and then we're living in a very small rental house, and it was not the right house for COVID and isolation. No, it was not good. iPads, bad for the brain, good for a parent. Yeah.
You talked about the book, and that did seem like the writing of it, the release of it did it have a cathartic effect on you, do you think, in terms of just going through that process of reflection?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think, without, sounding like a pompous git, I mean, I think it is true that it was part of a journey, a process of working it all out and, you get a kind of being happy with where things are and what they're at and working out the leadership of the National Party and so on. What is definitely not true, though, says me, it's been amazing to shamelessly use spin-off to set the record and my version of history straight on so many things, actually. So thank you, Toby. But is that... But it's not genuinely isn't I didn't get the leadership, and so that's sort of it. Actually, I was talking with Grant Robertson about this. There's a lot about finance that's amazing, right? I mean, as we all know, it is a remarkable privilege to get to shape a country at a level, right? And so it wasn't... It was more just, and I never do, but I literally did do a pros and cons chart, and the pros of getting out were much higher than the sort of the reasons to stay in, and so yeah.
So did you do a quantitative list? Because it's not like if you just number them off, some are more important than others, right? Or did you do like an elaborate kind of data visualization or use Lego?
There was calculus and statistics involved. Yeah. It was amazing.
No. Did you get Paul Goldsmith to add it up?
Treasury approve it?
You might have made the wrong decision.
Fiscal hole.
Goldsmith,
we rechecked that.
I got it wrong. No. No,
Simon,
no.
who would people be surprised that you actually really like in Parliament?
Actually, it's taken me, I cannot believe I'm saying this. We should edit this out in the... I actually, whilst I could say many, many bad things about him, I do quite like Trevor Mallard in a weird, strange Stockholm Syndrome kind of way. Like, he has, at least he's got a bit of something about him. You know what I mean? Like you know, look, I know Toby will have heard it because he's just a bloody slave to Hosking, right? He's listening every morning. I was on Hosking this morning, and I can't even remember why I was telling you that story. Actually, it's gone from me. But there was a reason for this. Why I was telling you about Hosking and Mallard. But anyway, Mallard. That's it. That is it. I was saying, you know, one of the things I'm going to say in my valedictory...
Imagine he could have been Prime Minister.
It has nothing to do with the whiskies with my class intake last night. Nothing. I was bemoaning the beigeness of politics, and I will give Mallard this. He at least brings a bit of flavour and colour to the game, and you know, we all need a few bitter, twisted old men in Parliament.
Nice. There's a bit at the end of your book, Simon, where you kind of go off on this sort of fantasy, imagine chucking it all in, imagine leaving it, imagining retiring to the Coromandel or somewhere and sipping your daiquiris on the seashore or whatever it is. And then you go, oh no, but God, I'd be so bored. Wouldn't that be terrible? And given that, that's where you ended up after going through that process of writing the book. And given that you could still have been Prime Minister one day, is there not going to be a moment where you go, oh, what the fuck have I done? What have I done?
You are a fiend for Hosking, right? Because that is exactly the question he asked me. Exactly, word for word. You've been listening. Wow. Look, let's be, you know me, I'm an over-disclosure and a just say a paragraph or two too much. But that's partly why I'm leaving, because I like to keep life interesting and so on. I feel very confident with the decision I've made. I'm not going to regret it, right? And I'm not going to say I don't do regrets, because I don't know whether that's true or not, but I'm not going to regret it. I did my pros and cons and used the calculus, and Goldsmith came and helped me at the end, and I'm confident in that decision, right? What is true, though, is I will feel just a twinge, if it happens, of envy when I see a National Party finance minister who isn't me, knowing deep down in my heart that I would have been much, much better. Right? So I will. There will be a twinge of that sort of envy. I think that's slightly different from regret. On the Prime Minister, again, because I do like to over-disclose, and if I was John Kerr or another, I would definitely move on from this. But in the end, my scenario to becoming Prime Minister, which is not the be-all and end-all of life at any stage, but, you know, it would obviously, if it had happened for me, or if it did in the future, be an immense privilege and a chance to shape a wonderful little country. My only path there would have been a John Howard one, right? Or a Bill English one, I suppose, in New Zealand context, of doing hard yards, working in very, very hard, and you know, in due course and some significant amount of time getting there. But I'd be older, fatter, greyer. My kids would be 20. They may or may not talk to me. And so, you know, that was all on the pros and cons, man.
Hey, Simon, we did a poll on the Hui this week of, Māori voters, and we asked them to rank who they thought the top performing Māori MPs were. And just so you know, you were number 11 out of 26.
Out of 26?
Which is pretty good.
That's
Yeah.
a midpoint.
It's not bad,
like
eh?
Grant Robertson's, I'm in the top half of his preferred National Party finance spokespeople he's faced off on.
Well, there you go.
That's not 26, is it? It's not bad.
It's not bad. Hey, but what I wanted to ask you without being like downer vibes is what was your darkest day in Parliament where you had that real, like, terrible feeling in your puku?
This is like choosing between children because there have been a few. It's and maybe this is part of the reason to get out as well. Like there have been some dark days, and what happens in a way is you get better and better at absorbing them. I think one of the dark days, in a funny way, it's not because it was actually significant or in a sense I was worried about it, but was around the scenario where Judith Collins lost the confidence of the National Party in the 24 hours that followed before that, or really just the period where there were ticker tapes on the websites with my name vis-a-vis, inappropriate conduct. And I suppose the thing in general terms that always gets you as a politician is not so much the effect on myself, but look, it's family seeing those things and the effect it has on them and the worry it has on them and their sense of, reputation and mana and so on for them. And so that was stressful. Very stressful, and I in the end had a confidence about where it would come out, because as I've said in the past, look, it's not my first rodeo, and I worry in a way you end up becoming crazy in politics because you're so unstressed about some of these things that objectively one should be stressed about, right? But that was stressful in terms of family and the effect on them and them not knowing the reality of what it was all about or what it meant. And so on. So, yeah, it wasn't generally I've slept like a baby despite what's been going on, but that was not a great sleep that night.
You mentioned you're going to be envious and loathing of the next National Finance Minister, and Nicola Willis is obviously who you're talking about there, given that she was announced just in
I did not use the word loathing. You're not going to slip that into my... I've said many loose things on this podcast.
Congratulations to Nicola Willis. What sort of finance spokesperson, what sort of finance minister is she going to be? A lot of people were picking Chris Bishop, but Chris Luxon has gone for the deputy. She's got some experience, I think, on finance expenditure select committee. She worked with John Key for a long time. Is she the
Actually,
business?
Could we go back a bit and just, Simon, if you could tell us, what actually the finance portfolio involves? Because when it hits the news, it's all about fiscal holes and adding errors, right? But it's not a mathematics job, right?
No, I think that's right, and that's in a sense the advice I've given Nicola. I think she'd be great. I think she'd grow into the job really well because she's got the core competencies, which as Ben so rightly says, actually aren't. Can I count to 15? And those sort of things. I mean, don't get me wrong. That's important, and it's a decent appreciation of economics and public finance stuff is all good stuff, and she will have that. It's actually in the end political skill and judgment. These are the things. And my basic shtick, which people know, and I've been gratified to kind of get a bit of a sense of even from enemies in the field like Neil Jones and so on Twitter, but is my basic advice to a new finance spokesperson would be, look, actually keep these things really simple. A key skill is to take from the big and the significant stuff going on in the numbers and reduce that down to Mary and Porirua or Jim in West Auckland or Papamoa or wherever it is. And so that's very important. And then when you find that, it's a prioritisation game. So I think, weaker finance spokespeople across parties and so on have tended to be scattergun and focused on all these things. Actually, it's about those 2 or 3 things that you think really matter and are going to drive an economy and motivate New Zealanders and doing that. So keep it simple and be consistent on all of that. Actually, while I'm on a roll, I think another thing that's incredibly important, and I've said this to my colleagues, a key skill for politicians, it seems to me, or really, really successful leaders in any endeavour actually, is around reading widely, looking widely, and having a sense of where things are going, right? And so, dare I say it, but it was pretty apparent to anyone who was thinking these things through that inflation, whilst we didn't know Ukraine, but inflation was going to keep going up, and we were going to have some real problems at this point in 2022. So being able to see those, pick up on them, speak competently about them, as I say, simply, consistently, to me those are the sort of things that really matter in a finance spokesperson. A finance spokesperson, in many ways, is the policy leader for a party. And I think Nicola will do a good job at that.
And in terms of the example that you just alluded to, from an opposition perspective, that was about distilling it down to cost of living, those 3 words, wasn't it? Was that you that led that, or who or did you see that happening around the world? Or
many hands make light work. I do think though, as my caucus will attest, we were talking about these things right from the start of Chris Luxon's tenure, because I could see where it was going. It was important. Then it was important to link the government to those things. So I think it's not all their fault, absolutely. And of course, Ukraine, blah, 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 supply chains, all these things. But there is an issue around government spending and the inflationary effect. So it's doing that. Now, though, actually, we've got to a point where that's almost that's almost beside the point. People are feeling it. It's about how the government reacts to that. And that leads me into sort of where we're at in terms of election 2023. Be really clear, Labor's got some big advantages. I mean, one of them is lots of dollars, the Treasury, and the ability to pivot and move and scratch itches like reduce petrol in one-off way and so on. What National's got at its most basic is, under Chris Luxon, a very clearly renewed sense amongst New Zealanders, like we didn't have for a while, that we are the best on economic matters and cost of living and housing and these sort of things. And if I'm right, without making you all kind of incredibly depressed, I reckon we're in for a pretty tough time in the next year or two. I mean, I personally think the risk of recession is very high, and that will be, whilst we don't want that to happen, that seriousness will lead people to National, it seems to me. Anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, went on there. But
well, I mean, the National opposition was in good stead, wasn't it, with banging the drum on cost of living, laying it out to people. I mean, and then the finance spokesperson up and left unexpectedly, which unfortunate. Annabelle, that poll which came out last week, which put National in the lead, which put the centre-right bloc in the lead for the first time in more than a couple of years, I think. Simon Bridges mentioned that wicked perfect storm. We love an elemental metaphor. He was talking about winds and sails with the National Party. And you have got the Omicron surge, you've got this inflation, rampant cost of living, and you've got a recent occupation of the grounds of Parliament for more than 3 weeks. When you look at all that, do you reckon that Labour will be hoping this is the low point, or do you think, as Simon Bridges suggests, we're in for a torrid time in the year and a bit ahead?
Well, I think, of course, Labour will be hoping that this is a torrid point, but I don't think it is. I think this is the start of a pattern. And, I mean, to be fair to Ardern, a lot of the stuff that she's had to contend with, and to a large degree even inflation, is not of her making. But it kind of is the perfect shitstorm all coming to bear at once. And while they've done, I think, a really good job with COVID and, natural disasters and all sorts of crazy stuff that's happened, I think they have wasted their political capital that they got after the last election, and I think people are just getting hoo-ha with it.
It is. I'd be interested to hear what you think about this, Ben, but it is. When there was some talk that Chris Bishop might take the finance portfolio for National, there was some talk about COVID being kind of over, or less important, and certainly people are over it, which I think is reflected in that poll to a large degree. But when we remember, for example, that the pickle that former National leader Simon Bridges got into when he went quite hard as an opposition MP, saying quite a few things that in retrospect don't seem at all deranged, but seem probably to have been mistimed in terms of the level of the criticisms early on in the pandemic. You probably agree with that, wouldn't you, Simon?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
That
what were they again?
Nah, let's not go. Life's good. Life's good. It's been a book. There's been the Yaks. There's been a renaissance. There's a stunning media career coming.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
There's a radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on The Spin-Off or wherever you get your podcasts.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBet.
Are you curious about how business can be better? I'm Simon Pound, and I host Business is Boring, a podcast where I kōrero with some of the most interesting people in entrepreneurship, commerce, and making things happen. Tune in to Business is Boring every Tuesday, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with Spark Business Lab.
But what the hell was I saying? There's some sense in which that's banked, right? Like you look at that chart that's been going around from the Our World in Data, which talks about the excess morbidity, and you've got these countries going way out to the right in the huge numbers, and you've got New Zealand down the bottom going the other way. More people have stayed alive over the last couple of years as a result of the response. But I'm getting to a question here eventually. Is there a sense in which the smart strategy is to go, oh yeah, well done on COVID, nice one. Right, let's talk about the economy, let's talk about people's lives, let's talk about the future. That in a way, the less said about COVID now, the better. And, in terms of that, whatever the political aphorism is, that voters don't really care what happened a year ago, 2 years ago. They care about what's being put in front of them now.
Which, the thing is, just like the old superannuation accord of the 90s, it seems like both the major parties are trying to get a bipartisan accord that neither of them care about COVID anymore, because it's really, first of all, the actual policy setting gaps between the two parties have narrowed to sort of almost nothing, right? The borders, we've just seen the borders going to be reopening even earlier than we thought. Vax mandates, the Prime Minister's been saying that, they'll be sort of on their way, and the traffic light system, after the peak will probably be sort of discarded. So, in terms of those sort of big differences, as opposed to just kind of keeping on the Ministry of Health's sort of, tale about rat tests and things, COVID's becoming an operational matter, right? And that was the government's strategy as well. And I think both parties will be pretty happy to just sort of, make it a kind of non-partisan operational issue. But, that's the reality, right? You said it's been 2 years since National was ahead in the polls under the leadership of plucky upstart S. Bridges in February 2020. Then, two things happened to change that. The first was the COVID response, world leading, you can't argue with the results. Unprecedented MMP result for Labour. The second thing was that the economy was holding up much, much, much better than anyone thought. In fact, they were boom times for a lot of people because there was all this fresh money coming in from the Reserve Bank, and the inflationary effects hadn't flowed through into things like petrol, consumer items, things like that. They had just been making everyone's houses worth more. And so the middle classes actually felt really good at the end of that first year of the pandemic. And they and it's only sort of but if the two things holding up your political popularity are outstanding COVID response, eliminating the virus, beating the disease, and strong economy, well, there's no surprise that you start to dip once everyone has COVID and and petrol is $3 a litre. That's all you've got to fall back on is Kiwi Build, which has sort of added about 10 houses last year, and you're back to that same sort of lack of delivery, which I think, like Annabelle said, they were elected with 50% of the vote essentially. They could do whatever they wanted, and there hasn't actually been much progress on a lot of their agenda, particularly as, opposition leader Simon Ridges used to say, in terms of this delivery stuff, in terms of getting things done. We're sort of having another press release about, they've finally decided this time on, on the light rail for Auckland. I mean, I think that was meant to be finished by now. I think that was meant to be extended to Hamilton by now, under the original designs.
She's got a cabinet of people that can't get shit done. That's her main problem. And then, ironically, in my mind, Louisa Wall is like a really effective MP who's great at getting her private members' bills across and stuff, and she's just sitting on the sidelines. It's weird.
It struck me the other day that there are now all these implementation, operationalising, delivery units. There was a time where you were, if you hadn't been invited onto a working group, then you were nobody, and it's now if you haven't been invited onto an implementation group, then you're nobody. The reality, though, in some ways, is that you touched on this, Simon. The government has the control of Treasury. The government acted this week to cut 25% off the fuel excise, because it needed to, and it did. It showed some agility. It showed that it could be nimble in response to that stuff. It's showing again this morning, as it brings forward the opening of the border to tourists, that it can move quite quickly, and that's what makes a difference, isn't it, Annabelle? In the kind of very base public arena of politics.
Yeah, I think it goes to show that when they have the political will to do something, they can make it happen. And I think, obviously, taking the tax off fuel is going to be really helpful. I mean, the whole cutting public transport down to half price is probably something they should have done at the start of the last term, if we're serious about, our once in a generation moment to turn around climate change and all of that stuff. But I think again, it just comes back to that thing of being too slow to move. I mean, the whole thing around water, like in 2017, people were up in arms about the bottling of New Zealand water and it being exported off overseas.
Nothing's happened.
Everybody got whipped up about it. It was a huge election issue. They made big promises, and to this day we're still shipping it all off overseas. Why not? Like, I realise that it's helpful to base good policy on good research, but why couldn't they have just stuck a moratorium on water bottling until they'd done that and then get some legislation happening? I mean, it's a little bit... Obviously, a lot's happened since then. Like, I was thinking today, remember 2 years ago when they couldn't give away barrels of oil? And now we're paying like $3 at the pump. Or like the good old days when we used to worry about the brain drain. Like, man.
Well, we would have been worrying about that again if I was still finance spokesperson. Don't you worry about it. I think something in what Annabelle's saying is that So I'm not arguing against what I said earlier. You can win an election on tactics and, chucking out free fees or whatever it is that you're doing. It is very tactical from the government, though, right? So they don't seem to be able to get into the underlying issues of the cost of living, and I appreciate they're very difficult ones and deal with those. So I just have the sense it's tactics rather than a deeper strategy, which is not so important in opposition, very important in government. On COVID, look, in the end, and this cannot be taken out of context by anyone, they've done a good job on COVID. Right, the overall, no. Look, they've stuffed up a lot of stuff, rats and blah, blah, all the stuff, bishops all over. But
there's rats everywhere. Everyone's got rats.
Exactly. Now we have. I've got like 18 of them right here. But the
listeners, Simon Bridges just held up a plastic bag full of rats.
You've been to broadcasting school, Toby.
That's
with
right.
That kind of. So anyway, where was I going on that? So. But in the end, it'll move on from that. And I sort of think I've always been big on this one. I used to use as an argument as to why I was going to win the 2020 election. It's Churchill, Clement Attlee, right? Churchill won the war. Everyone knows who his name is. Most of this is probably haven't even heard of Clement Attlee, but he won in 45 because they banked what Churchill had done. So I personally think COVID. I'm not saying it's gone away yet. I'm not There's plenty more to go, and we'll feel the effects of it. I personally think the election will be on different things. Massive amount of mansplaining here, but let me give you one more thing. My view of politics often, it is a bit of a battle of the narrative. Actually, it's not even a narrative sometimes. It's just topics. Right? And so it's pretty simple. Talk about the stuff they believe you on. And we know that if you're on the blue team, they believe you on stuff with dollars and bridges and physical stuff. We know if you're in Labour, look, caring and sharing and health and education are at a level. These are the things. So I don't agree with something you said, Ben. Labour will still want to talk about COVID till the cows come home, because in the end, that's in the but I know, and
it's been their strongest suit.
Yeah, and I know though, if I'm talking cost of living as a National Party MP, it almost doesn't matter what I'm saying. Right, but people are picking up on that issue and they know they can believe me more than someone on the other side, because that's what we're good at. All right.
Although I have to say, in terms of the latest polls, I'm not convinced that it's anything Luxon in particular has done. I think it's just that inflation and the cost of living is starting to hit ordinary New Zealanders, and they're pissed off about it, and therefore they're supporting Luxon. They don't like what happened out the front of Parliament with the protesters and stuff. So I think it's
very messy time for a government.
It's more about being annoyed with the government than it is about being lured by Luxon, in my opinion.
It's true. It's true also that in the UK at the moment, Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, is trying to nail the Boris Johnson Tory government over cost of living. So
and Anthony Albanese in Australia.
Right. Well, so, that kind of underscores the extent to which there is a large part of it that isn't under the control. I've jotted a few things down here, Simon Bridges, that we might include when we do a post on this. One is, quote, "It doesn't matter what I'm saying," I think is like a political picture. And also, Jacinda Ardern...
Don't take me out of context. Anything I don't like in hindsight is out of context.
Jacinda Ardern is New Zealand's Winston Churchill, I think was the other. Quite interesting. Hey, before we wind up, let's talk just quickly about... the by-election that we're going to have in Tauranga. There's, some talk about whether or not Winston Peters, who has some experience with by-elections and has some experience with the constituency of Tauranga, might find a way to kind of sail back in on that perfect storm. There's some I've seen, I think Joe Moore in Newsroom wrote this morning, it was interesting, tipped Tanya Tapsell, who was an impressive candidate. Where was she? Was it out east?
She was in Bay of Plenty. East Coast.
Yeah. What do you think, Simon? Would she be a worthy successor?
Look, it's not for me to sort of pick, and I'll try and be very, but as a person, she's obviously high caliber, fantastic. And, I was at the time as leader very excited about getting Tanya involved. And, it's a crying shame she didn't get in, but, it was a terrible election for us. I mean, in terms of the
you guys
by-election,
had a shit list.
Anyway, yes, no, I've said all sorts there. You can't take that out of context. You don't know what I say. By-election, two basic thoughts for you. Look, the first one in relation to Winston, and I just say this subjectively, because I have a sneaking regard for him, a bit like Mallard. He's 20 years too late. Look, Tauranga is a very different city that was even when I first became the Member of Parliament. I said, and Toby would have heard this on Hosking, it's new builds, it's acacia berries, and it's also actually complicated issues around homeless and crime and stuff now. So it's a very dynamic little city. And so it's 20 years too late for Winston. It's just not his kind of town anymore. It's a left-right thing. And actually, as saying to James Shaw, the Green Party should put more effort in Tauranga, dare I say it, because it's just a more modern city where there'll be people who will share that kaupapa. The other point I would make, though, and I got this literally before talking to a former NZ First staffer, and his view was no way Winston will stand. And the reason for that in the end is Winston knows right now, we're actually in the lead up to the election, he could only win a Labour provincial town, right, or city, right? So it would have to be I'm riffing here, this is actually not a great example, but a Wairarapa or because he needs to be railing at this stage in the game, and with a city like Tauranga, that's just not his deal, it seems to me.
What do you guys think, Annabelle, Ben? The other thing that I wrote about a little bit yesterday was whether or not this by-election will end up channeling some of the underbelly of disaffection that manifested in part at Parliament grounds, and whether I've got a little mini scoop for you for Gone By Lunchtime, which is that I asked Matt King, who's starting a political party, whether he was up for it, and he said he's not ready yet. So Matt King has ruled himself out. You'll be disappointed to hear. But there are a bunch of, we did this in the last podcast or the one before last, and there were sort of 10 or 11 different political figures that have been involved in that movement. And now I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that any of those people have a chance of winning it, but it does change the nature potentially of the contest. What are your thoughts, Annabelle and Ben?
No, I don't think so. I think those are sort of marginal figures. Even with the concentrated attention that goes on a single race in a by-election, unless their campaign rally ends up occupying the town square or whatever Tauranga has for, 3 weeks and setting fire to it, I don't think they'll get a lot of attention. This is these are fringe movements. I mean, it's a good opportunity for national, obviously, you could say they have everything to lose and that it's, it's a very safe national seat. By-elections tend to swing against the government in any case, particularly, say, at a time like this when there's a bit of disaffection, when the government's maybe a little on the way down. But at the same time, a strong performance from a good candidate, particularly one who helps sort of lux and flesh out what is, overall, you could say a pretty uninspiring sort of, battalion to go to war with in 2023. I think it's all upside for National in the by-election. And I don't think Winston Peters will get anywhere near it. I don't think he could bear the humiliation of losing. Yeah.
All upside for National, Annabelle? Surely not.
Well, funnily enough, I thought that Winston might throw his hat in the ring just because he's clearly so desperate for relevance at the moment, wandering around without his mask on down in Wellington and whatnot. I wouldn't have put it past him. But having heard what Simon said, I actually think that he's spot on. I do think it'll become a rallying point for some of those fringe parties again, and that they'll use it to try and, get a bit of oxygen. But, yeah, I mean, clearly it's going to I think Tanya Tapsell is a really impressive wahine and exactly the sort of candidate that National should be targeting. Is there a legal requirement to have a by-election?
Yes. Yeah, basically, unless it's an election year and then there's certain rules and timeframes, but in this case, yep. When I put my letter in.
It's a lot of money that we have to pay for you, Simon.
So it's not too late. You haven't put your letter in.
This is what Trevor Mallard told me.
So you have to give a letter to Trevor.
Tom Brady's retirement lasted about, what, a week?
Right. Yeah. It's like it's like when people, that thing of having a funeral before you're dead. So you just get a chance to see all the tributes. That's what's going on here, isn't it?
It's been very affirming.
Hey, thanks, Simon. Thanks, Simon, for joining us. Really appreciate it. We'll, after this podcast, we'll talk about terms for you joining Gone By Lunchtime permanently.
Brilliant.
Ben, good luck for the future. Annabelle, thank you. Thanks, everyone, and we'll talk again soon.
Cheers, man.
Have a great life, Simon.
Thanks so much.
Hey,
You're a beautiful
Simon, will you come and be a commentator on the Hui now?
Yes.
Hey.
Promise?
This is not. Yeah. Don't use
Promise, because every time I ring you for an interview, you ghost me. You chips me. You serve me the ghost chips.
Hard issues, but out of politics, there are no hard issues.
Kai. No mai haere mai.
Good luck.
Kia ora.
Ka kite anō.
Ka kite.
Kia ora, I'm Duncan Grieve, founder of The Spinoff. You can help us keep all of The Spinoff's award-winning journalism free for everybody by becoming a member today at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spinoff. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spinoff member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spinoff Podcast Network.